Charlie Kirk leaves Megyn Kelly absolutely speechless as he tells a tale about JD Vance, Trump's very recently picked vice presidential nominee. First ever VP nominee to be a Marine veteran, by the way. Fun fact. Guys, this is gonna be a fun video. I think you're gonna enjoy it. Just a little interesting. You get to learn a little more background about JD Vance, you know, his kind of journey, his story, things like that. So I think you're gonna enjoy it. I know I did. And we're gonna get right into that video. But first, everybody, please make sure you like our video, share it around, and here it comes, here it comes. Yes, subscribe. Guys, I know I'm always saying the subscribe thing, okay? Forgive me, but obviously I do want you guys to subscribe too, okay? It's very important. It helps keep us afloat. We really appreciate it. And thank you guys so much for your continued support. To those of you who have already subscribed and keep watching, seriously, we appreciate you, and God bless. As always, I'm your host, Darian. Let's get right into the video.
My God, JD, I'm thrilled that he's the pick. How about you?
Yeah. I couldn't be happier. Thanks, Megyn, for having me. I was pushing for this for quite some time. You know, I was a early endorser of JD's Senate primary when he was at 1 or 2% in the polls in Ohio, and nobody thought he had a chance. And he was up against the establishment and tens of millions of dollars. And that's a story worth telling as well. I was getting very emotional watching that video because JD's a dear friend. And I hope your audience understands, the more you get to know JD Vance, the more you're going to like him. His family is extraordinary. He is a good, smart man. And I put it in that order. He is a decent person of high integrity, wonderful family. He's in it for the right reasons. There are some really important similarities that JD Vance has with President Trump, such as being a class traitor. It's important to remember, Megyn, that when that book came out, he was so celebrated by the left-wing elite. He was the keynote speaker at the Aspen Ideas Festival. He was on every major left-wing network being celebrated as the guy who can explain why Donald Trump has such a big following. And JD Vance, over a series of years, made a decision to forsake that type of popularity and to go in not just a career in politics, but to get into a pattern of advocacy that led him into politics. And it is an extraordinary rise. And you said it so perfectly, Megyn, only in America. And only in America is it possible where a young man, and he's older than me, but he's relatively young in the modern political dynamic, can come from absolute poverty, be abused, raised by his grandmother, had all the odds stacked against him to become the nominee for vice president of the United States, for the front runner and former president. How did we get here? Well, I mean, we got here first and foremost through divine providence, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that over the last week. Just the fact that this convention is still going on in its current form or fashion. But secondly, it's a testament to JD. JD did not want this, Megyn. I hope everyone understands in the audience. You know, almost everyone who was going for vice president had like war rooms, and they had, you know, lobbying campaigns, and they were going after this to try to buddy up to Trump for the last 9 months or 10 months. When his name was first floated to become Trump's vice president potentially in February and March, he's like, me? Like, what? He's like, yeah, I love Trump, but like, what? And this is a guy who didn't ask for it. He didn't plan for it. He's not full of that kind of naked political ambition that I find to be so disgusting and repulsive. Things just kind of come to him, and people see in him the best of the Trump movement. Forgotten America, someone who lived that story and who will fight for those voters in Washington, D.C. You
know, I said this before to our audience here, and I said this isn't like said in a romantic way, but my time with him, and we were there for a few days, led me to believe that this is a beautiful man. He's a beautiful man, and I think that opening shows you what I mean. He's thoughtful, he's soulful, he's reflective, he's introspective, and I happen to love the fact that his good character, his survival, was shaped by women. It was his mama who got him through this childhood and her strength. His sister, with whom he has such a loving and dear relationship to this day, loved Lindsay. And then I love the fact that it's Amy Chua at Yale Law School, who's like one of the only non-woke, amazing, like normal professors at Yale Law School who would help him take the next step. You know, that she saw in him, this is not just the next generation of lawyer. This is a special guy whose voice needs to be heard well beyond the Yale Law School campus and the campuses of white shoe law firms in America.
So a little fun fact about Amy Chua that I don't think is mentioned here. She actually is the very woman who, aside from being a mentor of sorts to JD, inspired him to write Hillbilly Elegy. A really good memoir, by the way, highly recommend it. I mean, so I haven't read it myself personally, so I'm not gonna opine too much, but I've heard really good things about it. I've watched the movie. The movie was solid, really enjoyed it. And it's totally true that JD, unfortunately, did not have a father growing up, really. His parents divorced at a very young age, and his father was just totally gone and out of the picture. Really despicable, if you ask me, honestly. But I do think Megyn should give a little more credit to JD's grandfather. I do know he was around himself and also pretty much raised him along with his mama, as Megyn mentioned, but neither here nor there. Point is, the guy came from a very stressful, tough situation that many people really, unfortunately, failed to rise above of, and JD did it, and that's remarkable and very impressive. Regardless of whether you think he's sincere or not sincere, that's a whole nother debate people can have. I'm not gonna weigh in on that today. He has a very impressive story, one very much of being the forgotten American and rising up, one could say, to the elites, and then becoming a class traitor. And I mean that in the best of all ways, by the way. Much like many would argue, perhaps, that Donald Trump is a class traitor of sorts and that he cares more about the working man than he does the rich liberal elite, many would say the same for Vance. So all very respectable things.
Helped steer him. And she helped Usha too, who had, 2 federal clerkships, including, as I said, for the Supreme Court. So to me, that speaks so well of him, like that. The Republican Party, as you know, still gets demonized by the Democrats as like a bunch of just moronic, burly men, toxic men who want to take away the rights to abortion. And like, yes, JD is pro-life, but that is a man who respects women and whose very character was shaped by strong women.
Without a doubt. And I mean, it's important to understand that the men in JD's life failed him. And who filled the void? As you went through the list beautifully. And so look, and JD has a huge heart. He radiates sincerity. And you know that because I'm around, look, honestly, Megyn, I'm gonna have to go through some sort of detox. I'm here at the RNC right now, and there are so many political creatures crawling around here. It's so disgusting. People, it's always about honestly, it's like always about an angle and I want something from you. And they just ooze that sort of stench of, I'm trying to game the system. With JD, it's completely different. And it's not just me. I'm going to tell you a true story. So this is in the middle of the Veep Stakes. We have our People's Convention in Detroit, Michigan. And we have nearly 10,000 people there. And I was like, hey, JD, we're doing a straw poll for the vice presidency. If you want to try to make it, I think you'll do very well because the audience likes you. He's like, yeah, it's my 10-year wedding anniversary. He's like, that's a top priority for me. He said, but let me see what I can do. So he prioritizes the wedding anniversary and he texts like the day before. He's like, okay, I think I can make it on Sunday. I said, great. So my team calls me and they said, hey, JD's coming, but he's driving himself from Columbus. It's like, what do you mean he's driving himself? This is a U.S. Senator, Megyn, who might be the next vice president of the United States or the selection for VP, who literally got in a car early on a Sunday morning, drove 3.5 hours to Detroit by himself, staffed himself, was so warm to all of our staff, probably on almost no sleep, took every picture, signed every book that was asked of him, gave an amazing speech, got back in the car so he could be back at dinner in Columbus, Ohio. I mean, like that's so unheard of.
Yes.
I mean, there are people that come and speak at our events that are running for dog catcher, and they come with an entourage and a posse that makes, most rappers look as if they're understaffed. JD Vance is, driving himself, and it's just like, he's like, I'm a regular guy. He doesn't think of himself as if he's, better than you or that he's part of some sort of, high society class. And I think that he adds a dynamic and an element to the Trump ticket.
All in all, what makes JD really appealing, I think, to many people is that he's got that humility on a personal level, and that's huge because so many politicians just don't. I mean, just look at what a jerk Joe Biden is, for instance, when he greets people, You're a lying, horse-faced, doggy pony soldier. It's a John Wayne quote, right? Just kidding, Biden made that up. But anyways, I digress. JD has this relatability that people really appreciate. He came from very humble means. Working man, once again, Hillbilly Elegy, great movie, and the book is, I'm sure, good too. Highly recommend you check both out. He grew up in destitute poverty, endured a lot of abuse, didn't have a father in the house, totally humble beginnings, and look how far he's gone. But I think he still remembers that. He remembers what he came from. He remembers what a struggle it was. And due to that, in my view, he always remembers to be grateful and thank God for what he has. And really, mad respect to that. And the young factor, that's great too. I can't remember the last time we've had a young person in politics, to be honest. We've got all these dinosaurs who, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, yes, Donald Trump to an extent, but he's a cool one though, okay? So I'm just saying, like, he's very youthful for his age, so unlike Biden or Pelosi or Mitch McConnell, who just like froze, you know, the other day. All that to say, that kind of youth energy is gonna do a lot for the conservative movement. And yeah, I think Charlie's right. It's a big deal.
That will grow as time goes on. People are going to deepen their understanding of what the MAGA agenda really is. And also there is a youthful dynamic, which I am so pleased that the data is screaming at us right now. Please put somebody on the ticket under the age of 50. Please put somebody on the ticket under the age of 50. And now you have Biden 81, Trump 78, Kamala Harris either 58 or 59, late 50s, and now JD Vance 39. I mean, that is a serious contrast who can really be a communicator to 35-year-old voters who are struggling to buy a home and struggling to build a family. And so I think this was the best pick that Donald Trump could make. And more than anything else, he has a decent and a good person.
Another notable thing about JD Vance that I think is worth noticing. Once he stopped being a, kind of anti-never Trumper like he was around the 2015, 2016 era, the media really stopped liking the guy. The leftist media was not promoting hillbilly elegy nearly as much as they were in the past, probably because they noticed he couldn't be a tool that they could just use for their own pleasures and, ideas anymore of how to like get back at Trump. But aside from that, he actually started advocating for decent policies, and I think that bothered them. Give you an example. Just take a look at his Wikipedia page. So Orwellian. They note that he's a hardline conservative, very conservative and right wing. In other words, he looks out for the American worker more than a multinational corporation. Imagine the horror. Point being here, if the media is hating on him and doesn't like him as much as they used to, there's probably something he's doing right, and I think that's worth considering. Well, guys, that wraps up the video for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, please comment below. Let us know what you liked, what you want to see next, and we'll see you guys again soon. Thanks so much, and God bless.